Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. Today I wanted to talk to you about seances. I wanted to give you some tips and some tricks that can help you with your own seance or can help better prepare you to attend a seance if you plan on attending. Those of you who might be new to my channel, my name is Jasmine Ambrosia, and I am a practicing witch. And in the topic of seances, I feel that I have some experience to speak on here. I have successfully led over about a dozen seances. Some of those being from our store, some of those being within the coven, some of those being just with myself, okay? And I want to kind of define the word seance first, because I think it's important that we all understand the language that we are using and the definitions that we are speaking from. So to me, the definition of a seance is essentially a group of people who are connecting with the other side, specifically the dead. And seances, especially here in the West, have had an incredibly colorful history. And I encourage you all to look at some of this, especially some of the seances that were going on in New York and the East Coast, okay? So kind of familiarize yourself with some of the historical aspects of seances and, really kind of consider what are your thoughts on seances, more of a philosophy standpoint and also from a historical standpoint. When I am running a seance, our seances tend to be a little different than maybe what comes to your mind initially when you think of a seance. I think a lot of people, when they think of seance, they think about a bunch of people sitting around a table, holding hands, and there's a medium or a channeler speaking for the spirit, and there's lights flickering and tables moving and people getting possessed and your dead grandmother coming in through the astral to berate you about something you forgot about, and your uncle trying to remind you of an important message, or possibly some sort of malevolent spirit bursting in the room seeking to physically harm somebody. And none of that is what happens at my seances. So far, no one has been possessed, and I don't really foresee that ever happening. And also, at my seances that I do at the store, that are events that people can attend, the goal of the seance is not to communicate with your beloved dead. That is not the goal of the seance. I will say that if you are interested in having a, cross veil experience and wanting to communicate with a deceased loved one, that is possible. And you can do that through booking a mediumship session with myself or others at the store. Seances, like I said, we are not seeking to communicate with your beloved dead. The seances that we run are actually more based upon true crime cases. So what happens at our seances is we would actually be looking at a true crime case. It might have some paranormal, supernatural, metaphysical, occult influence or undertones. It might not. A lot of the cases that we look at are local to our area or are around the Midwest of the United States. But some cases that we look at, are across the pond. Nonetheless, all of the cases that we look at, in my opinion, are incredibly fascinating. And to be able to invoke these spirits or spirits related with these cases and piece together their story and hear their voices is so fascinating. I know that true crime and the occult and the witchery are both relatively trending realms. And the reason why I wanted to kind of combine both of these is I feel like that there is some overlap in these communities. And at least in my local area, there are no seances done in this fashion. The seances that are done locally here are typically what you might think of a traditional seance, where you're going and hoping to communicate to a deceased loved one. And there's nothing wrong with those seances. I am not insinuating that there's anything off or wrong or false about that. I just really want the message to be out there that if you're coming to a seance that I am running, that is not going to be the experience that you are going to have. And I think that for the most part, you know, in the social media advertisements or the shop advertisements, this is pretty clear. So let's say that you're planning on attending a seance. I have many people who have attended seances, some people who have been to seances I have run in the past, some people who have never been to a seance. I have witchy people, you know, who are coming to a seance, and I have non-witches coming to a seance. I welcome the skeptics who come to the seances or the naysayers. I have had all sorts of religious backgrounds at the table of the seance: Christians, Muslims, atheists, Buddhists, pagans, whatever. Okay? You do not have to subscribe to any sort of philosophy in order to attend a seance. And all seances, legally speaking, are for entertainment purposes only, right? As you are paying money to attend an event, legally speaking, we do have to give the disclaimer that this is for entertainment purposes only. Now, like I said, maybe you're planning on attending your first seance or your first seance with me. There's a couple of things that I would encourage you to think about when it comes to attending a seance. Typically, I do 2 to 3 seances a year for the public at the store. Oftentimes, there will be 2 seances in October and 1 seance in December. The reason why the seances are around that time of year is because of the correspondence that that dark half of the year carries. Now, I definitely believe that you can contact the spirits regardless of time of year. And many witches have kind of joked that, you know, they talk about the veil being thin, but nowadays it almost seems like the veil is blasted right open. And I do kind of agree with some of these comments, I guess. But the seances, like I said, typically there will be 2 in October and there will be 1 in December. Things that you can do to actually prepare yourself for your first seance. If you, like I said, if you've never been to one of my seances before and you're wondering, what do I need to do to be ready for the seance? So number 1, I would encourage you to get your tickets over the phone. You can stop in person. You can also get your tickets day of, but it is going to be much more convenient for you, and you're much more likely to get a seat because spots are limited. So if you call over the phone, you can go ahead and just book your ticket to the seance and then show up day of. Now, many things that we do at the store are available in person and online. However, seances are an in-person event only thing. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to have to travel for the seance or get a hotel room or stay with a friend, you just want to make sure that you're going to be able to be there physically in person, especially for those of you who might be out of town. You just kind of want to make those arrangements. Second thing I would do to help prepare yourself for a seance is make sure that the day of the seance, you are in the right state of mind. And this is something that I talk about at the seance before we even begin. If you are having a hard day, because we all have bad days, and if you are having a hard day, or if you are just feeling off, disconnected, moody, emotional, you know, whatever the case might be, I personally would not recommend you coming to a seance. And the reason for that is if you are experiencing some of these feelings and you yourself are feeling like you're kind of off, you're likely to not necessarily have a great experience. So if you're not in the right frame of mind and you don't feel mentally and emotionally and spiritually stable, I would not recommend attending a seance, or any seance for that matter. That goes even beyond just my own seances that I host. Other thing that you can do to help prepare yourself for a seance is make sure that you are hydrated. Make sure that you have drank plenty of water. Make sure that you have plenty of energy for the seance. I would not recommend you going to a seance if you just pulled an all-nighter. I would not recommend you going to a seance if you're completely sick physically or exhausted. I would not recommend coming to a seance. Make sure that you have also eaten something before attending a seance. Whether you take your own meal and eat out in the parking lot, or you stop somewhere at a fast food joint and get you a good Taco Bell burrito or something before you come to a seance. It's always a good idea for any seance that you have something in your stomach and that you've eaten something before going to a seance. Now, another recommendation that is optional, because this will also be taken care of at the actual seance, is cleanse yourself, right? So I have a whole video about the 3 C's of keep it clean, keep it cleansed, keep it consecrated. You can check out that video for a little bit more of what I'm talking about here. But cleansing yourself before you come into the seance, which could be something like a simple visualization for you. It could be spraying some cleansing sprays before you come in. Cleansing yourself before you come to a seance is just kind of good ritual etiquette. However, before the seance starts, there will be a cleansing that happens anyway. Another thing that you can do to help prepare you for a seance is think about roughly what you have going on that day. If you have a very busy, jam-packed day, maybe going to a seance on a day where you've been running around the whole city, taking care of tons of errands and just feel overall rushed, or once again, like I was talking about earlier, tired or exhausted, maybe it's not a good idea for you to attend a seance. When it comes to seances is sometimes a seance, typically there is some sort of alert that it's going to start at a certain time. So let's say a seance starts at 8 o'clock at night. Some seances will have a cutoff time. So the seance will run for an hour and that's it. The seance is over. It gets closed out. You know that you're probably going to be on your way home, maybe no later than 8:30 or 9:30 or whatever. You might have a general idea of how long a seance is going to run for. The seances that I run, they just run as they run through. So I have led seances before that are 45 minutes long, and I have led seances before that can take upwards of 2 hours from start to finish. So I would encourage you to think ahead and think of maybe what you have going on the next day, or think about what you have going on later that evening. Maybe think about childcare or a babysitter, or think about, what you have going on that next day. You definitely want to make sure that you have an available window of time to participate in the seance. And if you do not have the time to put into the seance, then I wouldn't recommend that you go to the seance. So let's say that you've gone through that list there and you feel like you are ready to attend a seance. What is going to happen is that you're going to show up at the shop at the time, preferably a little bit earlier than the time the seance is supposed to start. So if the seance is supposed to start at 8 o'clock, it would probably best for you to show up around 7:45. And the reason why it's nice for you to show up early for the seance is, one, it's definitely just good witchy or spiritual etiquette to show up a little bit early. But also, if you have not already reserved your ticket, you're much more likely to be able to get a ticket if you come a little bit early. And if you come early, you'll be able to get an ideal seat in the seance room. So once you've got your ticket, you're at the store, then you will enter the seance room. And the seance room typically has a big table in it with chairs around it, and it's very much like what you might visualize when it comes to a seance. You might be picturing this table with candles and chairs and people sit all around the table. That is very accurate to what the seance is going to look like. Once everyone has gotten to the event, everyone who has pre-registered and already got their tickets and everyone who has purchased their tickets, we'll kind of take a name call and make sure that no one is being missed. And we tend to give a little bit of a grace period, because once the seance starts, no one is going to be entering or leaving, ideally, the seance room. So if the seance says it's going to start right at 8 o'clock, and if you feel like you're going to be a little bit late, or maybe you're stuck in traffic or something's happened, because life happens sometimes and we understand that, just make sure that you call the shop and let us know, hey, I'm running 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late. And normally we can kind of work something out, and we tend to keep a little bit of a grace period anyway for people who might be running a little bit late. That way they can still enjoy the seance. Once everyone has gotten there, then I will give some disclaimers about the seance. So one of the disclaimers I give is what kind of seance it's going to be. It's going to be based on a true crime case, not talking to your dead grandmother, right? So that's one of the first disclaimers I give. A second disclaimer I typically give is if the case covers anything sexually violent or extremely graphic, or potentially triggering in nature, I will disclose that information right off of the bat. So that way you can kind of decide if this is something that you still want to participate in or not. And before the seance starts, you can be refunded for your ticket. So if you come to the seance and you think that maybe you're ready for a seance, or maybe your mood changes before the seance and you're just not in the mood for it anymore, or maybe you've had a hard day and you don't know how comfortable you feel digging through case files that involve sexual abuse. Maybe that is not something that is going to be beneficial for you on that day. No questions asked. You can leave the seance room and be refunded for your ticket. Typically, we don't do refunds on classes and events, but in this case, it is a little bit different. And I want everyone to feel safe and to feel comfortable at the seance. So before the seance starts, for whatever reason, if you're not able to attend or you change your mind, then typically we can get you a refund. After those disclaimers are there, then typically we go through how the seance is going to work. So there's different things that happen before and during a seance that I'm not necessarily going to talk about in this video, because I have to leave some things within the four walls of the seance, of course. But there will be a cleansing ceremony that takes place before the seance actually starts. And the reason for that is to basically cleanse everybody in the room and the room itself, because it is in a metaphysical store, to prepare it to be utilized ritualistically. This also is there to kind of push out temporarily any spiritual forces that might be lingering around guests, to prevent them from entering into our seance space. Because of course, our beloved ancestors and our guides and our gods are always with us. But when we enter in the seance space, it is truly just going to be us, is the ideal. So that way we don't have the seance affected by any sort of outside forces. Next thing that'll take place at the seance is there will be some sort of circle casting at the seance. So you can kind of envision this as like an energetic astral dome that rises up over the table in the room and shields the room. So it keeps the energy of the room in the room and prevents it from escaping, and it prevents any astral forces from entering this space. And also around this time, all the doors will be locked as well, to prevent anyone from physically entering into the space. Lights will be turned off. You will be asked to silence your cell phone, proper ritual etiquette. After that has been cast and we are cleansed and protected, then there will be an invocation of the dead, which will be said. And how these rituals go down is something that I'm going to keep for the seance. So I'm not going to be talking explicitly specific details about the seance, but I will give you a general overall guide, and like I said, of things to do and not to do when at a seance. So once that invocation is done, which by the way, all of this is something that you would actively be participating in. Seances are not seances you come to watch a performance. You're coming to participate. So when you come, be prepared to say these invocations and to participate along with some of these rituals that involve invoking the dead. Once that is done, there will be a number of modalities that will be used in order to communicate with the dead. And ideally, after we have talked about the case, before we've started the seance, once we roll the tapes, look at the files, talk about the case, everyone will kind of have their own questions, comments, or concerns that they would like to address. So that way, once we are in the space of the seance, everyone can take turns asking their questions and trying to piece together this case. And I will be kind of hosting and directing all of this to keep everything moving as smoothly as possible, and also to make sure that we don't have, several different people talking over each other at once and getting mixed messages. And ideally, we will also have someone kind of cataloging the information that we are receiving. So that way, moving forward, we can kind of keep it on the straight and narrow when it comes to start to finish of the seance. When you are in a seance, you are actually encouraged to participate and use your gifts, your clairaudience, your clairsentience, your clairvoyance, your claircognizance. If you get a gut feeling about something, speak on it. If you randomly start to smell something, speak on it. If you see a vision in your mind, speak on it. And this is something that'll be further encouraged before the seance starts, because typically guests will be split up into groups, and we will have more of our intuitive team and more of our fact check team. And with these teams, they will be working together to essentially get more information and knowledge about these cases. So, while the seance is going, you definitely want to make sure that you are being polite, that you are being respectful, and make sure that you are experiencing this with an open mind if you are a skeptic. Know that you do not have to believe in order to enjoy a seance and participate in a seance. Do not come to a seance if you are just going to be rude or abrasive or any of that. I have had people in the past who have come to a seance mostly just for the troll of it all, and because they just kind of want to shit on other people. That is not going to be tolerated at the seance, and I'm usually pretty good of kind of weeding those people out before we even get into a seance. So if you think you're going to come to one of my seances, and if you think you're going to shit on people who might have different beliefs than you, you're wrong. You're definitely wrong. Once the seance has concluded, a ritual will be done to close everything up properly. So no, you will not have anything following you home, possessing you. There's absolutely nothing to be worried about at our seance. I have had people before express that they've been very interested in participating in a seance, but they're worried or they're afraid or they're scared. And, I understand and I sympathize with some of this. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And, if you are truly afraid of participating in a seance, I would also suggest that maybe you don't participate and attend a seance if you're truly afraid. But I would like to just kind of encourage people to know that there's nothing to be afraid of at the seance. You're in no physical danger. Nothing is going to follow you home or hurt you physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. No. Now, there have been some people after the seance who have had very intense experiences during the seance, and, they might have some effects there, but that is more internal than it is external or related directly to the seance. So there will be a proper closing ritual for the seance, and then everyone will be instructed to make sure they practice proper self-care afterwards. So find earthly ways to ground your spirit back into the physical realm. That might be just, drinking some water, getting something to eat, participating, with a willing participant, not at the seance, maybe at home, in your own home, and some adult activities, whatever ways you can do to soothe and ground and really connect yourself back to planet Earth, so to speak. You'll be encouraged to do that. And there'll be a little bit of time after the seance for mixing and mingling and conversing. And after that, then that's typically it for the seance. this has been a video that has been highly requested for me to talk about the seances. And thank you so much for watching. And I know that some of you will likely be watching this video potentially next year, as seances are over for this year, but potentially next year. Or the strange thing about time is, I guess it'll be in the present when you're watching this, but it'll be in the past when I'm talking about this. So I just want to encourage you to, if you're interested, to come and to come check out the seance, and to come with an open mind, and to bring a friend. And thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, blessed be.